Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to today's webinar. This webinar is brought to you by University of Illinois Extension, Rural Partners, which is Illinois Rural Development Council, and the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs. My name is Laura Hepkessel. I am the Director of Telehealth for the SIU School of Medicine, and also I'm currently serving as the Chair of Rural Partners. There are a few housekeeping details I would like to share with you. Because we have so many on the line, please mute your mic and stop your video. If you have questions or comments, please add those into the chat space and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. If you're having audio difficulty, please let someone know in the chat space and they'll address that issue with you and provide technical assistance. The webinar will be recorded and will be available online on the local government education website for extension so that you can access it or share it with someone later. Nancy will send an email out when that recording is available. Now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. So Christopher Merritt is Director and Professor at the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs at Western Illinois University. Chris also currently serves on the board of Rural Partners. And Adi Atayaman is also with us today. He's a professor with the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs at Western Illinois University. His publication record includes more than 100 refereed papers and more than 100 consultancy reports, book chapters, and working papers. His research spans both traditional topics such as strategic planning to contemporary topics such as place branding, real-time tracking of consumer behavior, and big data analysis. In his faculty position with the IIRA, it involves directing and conducting research into issues that affect non-metropolitan businesses. And his most recent publication on telemedicine is Consumer Awareness of Telemedicine During the COVID-19 Pandemic, Demographic Influences. So you're going to hear a little bit about what Adi's been doing lately on his telemedicine research. So Adi, Dr. Atayaman, would you like to take it from here?
Yep. Thank you, Laura.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. Today's topic of discussion is going to be the economic value of telemedicine. We have been at IIRA, we have been conducting research into telemedicine and its impacts on rural economies. And this is part 3 of the research that we have been doing. And anyone interested in learning more about what we have been doing on telemedicine can visit IIRA website, click on publications 2020 and 2021, and you will find papers on topics such as telemedicine and also COVID-19 impacts on manufacturing and so on. Again, this topic was really pointed to me by Chris in his interactions with various stakeholders in the non-metro region. Chris became aware of the growing uptake of telemedicine, and so we had the research discussion as usual. Every week we get together and discuss research topics, and then we said, okay, we have to look into it and then see how we can actually contribute to this discussion. So, to begin with, again, I want to actually, give you the link to the paper on the topic that I'm presenting today, and it's available online. And I think Nancy gave the link earlier in an email. So please visit the website, download the paper, and also there is a software that goes with the paper. The software is essentially an interactive computer application that will help you gauge the economic value of telemedicine for each of the 102 counties in Illinois. So that goes with the paper. So please download the paper and also look at the software, and then you can actually see how we conducted the study, and also you can see the economic value that we have computed for telemedicine for Illinois counties. Now, This is from the Fair Health Data website, which is essentially sponsored by the American Physicians Association. And you will see that compared to 2019, in 2020, telemedicine uptake of usage increased tremendously by almost 5,000%. So that's why we started asking the question, okay, so if that's the case, what's the value of telemedicine for economies in Illinois, particularly for non-metro counties? And to address that question, again, data is a huge issue, I can tell you. If you are thinking about telemedicine research, you need to almost rely on the CMS Center for Medicare Services for data. And there is a huge lag too in terms of data availability. For example, now, if you pay like $6,000, you can actually gain access to 2020, the first quarter and maybe the second quarter data. And you need to pay and you need to wait for 3 to 6 months to get the data. So data availability is a huge issue. But we actually, really address this lack of data issue by combining several different data sets. One is the Medicare beneficiary survey, which is an individual level survey, and they had COVID-19 supplements and questions related to telemedicine were there, so we used that. And also we went into the Center for Medicare Services and put their data in terms of payments and so on for 2019, Medicare payments for 2019. And also we combined American Community Survey. So it's essentially we integrated data from 3 to 4 different sources to address this question: what's the economic value of telemedicine for Illinois counties? The telemedicine program, when I say program, that means service. We have like 250 plus services. I have given the URL in here, which is CMS Data, and they have a healthcare provider fact sheet, and the fact sheet lists many programs, telemedicine programs. But again, we need data. So we took that as a sampling frame, and then we went into the CMS website, Center for Medicare Services website, and look for.
I'm sorry, some people are having trouble hearing you. Could you just try to speak up a little bit more so that they can hear you?
Yep, sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Let me come closer. Just to summarize what I said, we had lots of issues with data. Data availability was an issue. So we started combining data from many different sources. The Center for Medicare Services, they have data up to 2019. And also we combined that with American Community Survey, and then also the Medicare Beneficiary Survey, which is an individual level survey. So we combined data from 3 to 4 different sources to gain insights into the economic value of telemedicine. Now, if CMS, Center for Medicare Services, they have a bunch of programs for telemedicine services. It ranges from anywhere from 200 to 250 programs. But we don't have data for each of those programs. We had data for 19 telemedicine services, and these are the services that they have been paying out. Medicare has been paying for these services a lot. So we took those 19 services, and they range from outpatient visits, 10 minutes, for example, to 60 minutes consulting with outpatients, and also virtual check-in and so on. So, as an example of CMS data, if you go into their carrier file, carrier means state. For Illinois, the code is 06102. They give you payments that they have made to services. For example, in 2019, Medicare paid roughly $14,000 for 193 services, which is really tele with patients who visit emergency rooms, and and that's roughly around $76 on average per service. So that's what they paid for. So we took that number and then we combined it with ACS, American Community Survey data, and also his MCBS. And based on simple algorithms that I have listed in the paper, and that's why I recommend that you please download the paper and see how we have actually approached this computation or calculation of the economic value of telemedicine. For example, looking at this, we know that we have data from 2015 to 2019 from Medicare, but we don't have 2020 data. Like what I said, 2020 data, you have to wait for a year to get that number. So we have to estimate 2020 numbers. We know from American Physician Association that there has been like 5,000% growth in telemedicine usage from 2019 to 2020. And so we have indicators like that. So based on that, we calibrated two simple models. One is a naive model, which is to do with really capturing the rate of change in telemedicine use from 2018 to 2019. And then we also fitted what's called as an exponential growth model to the data to come up with two different scenarios for 2020 in terms of telemedicine usage. Again, this is to do with counties. We don't have information about counties. So we have to estimate based on data that we could actually, get from CMS for the last 5 years up to 2019. Then we projected using two simple models to come up with a number, which is essentially, of course, we have a low value, which is this one FHL, and a high value, which is the high forecast value for 2020. And based on that, we need to actually say, okay, we know the number of people using telemedicine in each of the 102 counties in Illinois. So how could we actually, come up with a value, economic value calculation? To do that, we relied on published literature. I have given some examples in here, but what we did was we gathered multiple studies that have looked at telemedicine, and they have compared the cost of telemedicine to the traditional model, which is really face-to-face consultation with the physician, and the savings based on telemedicine. They range from, for this example in here, from 50% to 75% and so on. So we actually took all these studies, the numbers, and then came up with a median value. And then again, discounted the median value using what's called this interquartile range, which is essentially standard deviation, and came up with a number, which is 28%. What I'm saying is, traditional model, if it costs $100, telemedicine is going to cost only $72. That means there is a $28 savings if a person switches over to telemedicine. So that's the money the county, for example, can use elsewhere to fund infrastructure projects and so on. So essentially, we engaged in a model building process that came up with number of telemedicine users for each of the 102 counties in Illinois, and then assigned based on CMS payment, Center for Medicare Services payment to counties, a value which is an indicator of the economic value of telemedicine in the counties. Applying those models, the low end estimates are roughly $250 million in 2020 for Illinois, $210 million for metro, and around $34 million for non-metro. If you take the high range, which is the actual 5,000% growth from 2019 to 2020, that gives us $1.76 billion in terms of economic value of telemedicine for Illinois. Now, county-wise estimates differ. So how do we get that? And if you think about the calculations and the computations involved in this, showing a spreadsheet is going to take huge space, and it's not going to fit in anywhere in an online presentation like this. So we came up with an interactive computer application, which will actually give you the value of telehealth for each of those counties. And again, you can download this software from IARA website, and I'm going to actually demonstrate this for a county, and let me actually show you how it works. I'm hoping you can see this screen. Let's say I'm interested in Knox County. So I just go in and type in Knox, and then clicking on the estimate, so the low estimate, and then the high estimate, and then the post-pandemic estimate. So essentially for any county, you can actually get this, economic value of telemedicine. And again, we have a range, low to high. And also we have, what we have for a future kind of scenario analysis, the post-pandemic estimate. Now, going back to this county level analysis, so the interactive application can be downloaded from the IARA website, and you can see what's happening in terms of economic value for each of those counties in Illinois, any one of the 102 counties in Illinois. And again, the estimates are based on, we modeling the reality. So that's why we have an interval estimate rather than a point estimate. And we have also included what's going to happen post-pandemic. Is this trend going to continue? So you can actually, gauge what's going to happen at the county level for telemedicine. And again, this is the Knox County that I showed you, the low estimate, the high estimate, and the post-pandemic estimate. Essentially, if you think about the county and the value in 2020, we gained 9-folds more in terms of economic value from telemedicine, 1.76 billion in 2020. In 2019, it was only 242.2 million. And our predictions are it's going to go down. It's not going to continue in the same kind of growth trend. It's going to come down a bit. And that's based on really, theorizing about what telemedicine is in terms of, consumer behavior. That's what I'm going to actually, talk about next. Okay, a bit of a theory when it comes to economics and also marketing. We always try and model individual choices, purchases, and so on. Basically, we have two kinds of models. One is the simple, it's called aggregate constant ratio model, but essentially it's the pleasure-pain principle. So say, for example, I want to buy an ice cream and, say a specific brand like Magnum, and I like that, chocolatey flavor very much. So it's a pleasure for which I need to pay, let's say $5. So that's the pain. So you compensate pleasure and pain. And if pleasure is more than the pain, then I'm going to buy it. And that's for what's called those, sensory gratification choices in general, like eating an ice cream. Also, there are some risky choices. Let's say I want to buy a new model automobile, and I don't know what the outcome is going to be, whether it's going to be good in terms of, say, horsepower or, in terms of mileage and so on, or nowadays electric. So in terms of charging, I don't know what's going to be the outcome. So in that case, I have what's called as a likelihood kind of, probability kind of assessment. And that's for risky choices. So we have two kinds of choices: risk plus, it's not risky. So it's very much based on pleasure pain principle. And once it comes to risky choices, then we assign a probability, and then we hope we're going to actually gain the benefit. But of course, we may not gain the benefit. That's why it's called the risky choice. When it comes to telemedicine, a priori, we think it's a risky choice. Why? Think about this. You think in terms of a medical diagnosis, you need two kinds of data. You need physical data, vitals like blood pressure and so on. And you also need to listen to the patient, and the patient will explain his or her, say, problems, health problems, and so on. So with those two kinds of data, the physician will come up with a kind of a decision in terms of, prescription, for example. So in telemedicine, the physical data are not there. So, you have to rely on verbal data from the patient to make a decision, unless it's going to be like, a patient seeing her PCP, calling the PCP or video conferencing with the PCP. The PCP may have all the physical data of the patient. So in that case, it's different. But if you use the direct-to-consumer services like Teledoc, what's going to happen is, you'll be actually interacting with a physician in Texas, maybe, who is licensed to practice in Illinois. And essentially, you will be telling the physician what's happening, and the physician will not have access to physical data most of the time. So therefore, we think it's a risky choice. A priori belief is it's a risky choice. It's not like the simple pleasure pain principle, and it's like a compensatory rule, pleasure is more than pain and so on. So this is risky. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. The probability could be 50 or 60% that you will get well based on a telehealth consultation using applications like Teledoc. So based on that, so what's the theory? In marketing and in economics, we have what's called this prospect theory. The theory is very simple. It says that if I'm going to, tell people in general, I'm going to give you $100 for sure now if you want it, or you may choose to get $200, based on, like, say, flipping a coin. And, most of us will choose the sure $100 over the $200. The probability is 50-50. The expected value is still $100, but still most of us would prefer the sure $100 or the bet for $200. Now, once it comes to expenses, the reverse is true. So if I ask people, you need to give me $100 now, or you can flip a coin and decide whether you need to pay $200. Most of the people, most of us will choose the flipping of the coin over the sure, loss of $100. So this is called prospect theory, and there are plenty of theorems derived from the prospect theory. So we, in our paper, derived 4 theorems based on prospect theory, specifically for telemedicine. Say, for example, I'm not going to actually go in depth into all the theorems. I'm just going to actually give you some examples, and hopefully you will download the paper and go through that. And then, if you have any questions or suggestions, please email me. But anyway, so for telemedicine, investments in information and communications technology, so if you ask a person, okay, you need to buy a smartphone, you need to have broadband access, so you need to pay $200 to $300 now to gain a benefit, like consulting a physician or video conferencing facility or an app or something like that. So the preference would be, again, based on the prospect theory, preference would be for the patient to, hey, it doesn't matter, I will go out and see my PCP face to face. I don't mind exposure to COVID-19, so I don't want to actually lose $300 to $500 now to gain a benefit, which I may or I may not, So that's the kind of theorem that we used from prospect theory to test out how telemedicine is viewed among the general public. And again, we had 4 theorems, and one of them is loss aversion. That means you tend to value more what you have now rather than lose it now and acquire something else later. So, so status quo will be maintained. That means if you are seeing a PCP face-to-face, you would love to see the PCP face-to-face, If you don't have access to information and communications technology, and again, the chances are you're not going to actually spend money now to gain a risky benefit later. Okay, so we came up with, again, the theorems transposed into hypotheses, 4 hypotheses. And this is with, hypotheses. 1 is to do with informations and communications technology. And then, this is based on what's called the slope function, that, it doesn't matter how rich you are, you prefer $100 for sure now, rather than tossing a coin and thinking about gaining $200 later. So hypotheses like that, and again, the status quo, people who visit a particular location for medical care or a particular PCP would love to maintain that status quo and so on. So we tested those 4 theorems, and I can tell you we did obtain support for the hypotheses, and we used what's called as the individual level beneficiary, Medicare beneficiary survey data. Roughly 9,000 people responded to the survey, and we used questions from that survey to test the hypotheses, and we did gain empirical support. And I just want to actually share with you some of the findings, at the basic cross classification level, cross tabulation level. And again, as expected, if you have your information, communication, and technology access at a high level, we use median split. And again, I mentioned that in the paper, just for cross tabulation purposes. And they are the people who tend to use telemedicine more. And once you probe in depth into this ICT access, information and communication technology access, who has access and so on, of course, as expected, metro residents, they have much better access than non-metro. And also, if you think in terms of race, non-whites tend to lag behind ICT access. And age, there is an interesting relationship. It's U-shaped. That means less than 65, they have high access. 75 plus, they have high access, but the access, ICT access level goes down in the 65 to 74 age range. We actually thought about this, and we spoke with a few selective, it's again, they self-selected themselves as a convenient sample of people. And we realized this high level access for 75 plus age group is because of them having home monitoring devices and so on. So that's the reason that you have this U-shaped relationship between ICT access and age. And again, a couple of more examples. People who like telemedicine, they tend to use telemedicine more. That's behavioral science, and also economic theory clearly points out that's going to be the case. And if you, again, start thinking in terms of the demographics, metro people, they have more positive attitudes towards telemedicine. And once it comes to race, this is now like a 180-degree turnaround from information and communication technology access. Non-whites, they tend to prefer telemedicine more than Caucasians, So that's, again, from the survey. We have examples like this in the paper, more examples. And finally, the loyalty, both metro and non-metro residents, they are very loyal to their PCP, for example. So, they're not willing to switch that much. So what's the implication of, we doing really modeling numerical analysis of economic value of telemedicine, and then using the prospect theory to come up with this. Why did we do that? Why did we do a two-stage kind of research? The first one is to highlight the economic value of telemedicine to Illinois, and also for counties. The second one is to really gain insights into post-pandemic, or what's going to happen post-COVID-19. Is telemedicine going to keep growing forever, or is it going to hit a ceiling? Is it going to be linear growth, or is it going to be non-linear? And our research clearly says that, the modeling shows that it is a risky choice. When it comes to choice, it's not like buying an ice cream. Telemedicine is risky in terms of, outcomes. We don't know for sure how the outcome is going to be. So it's risky choice. And the score, attitude score, and that's what we used to really tweak the 2020 post-pandemic estimates. That means what we are saying is, if you like, then there is a high chance that you will actually, buy something or patronize telemedicine. If you like telemedicine, then you will. So who is going to actually, be repeat purchasing the service, telemedicine service? It's people who really like the service. And so based on that, we tweaked the numbers, and that's where we came up with the post-pandemic estimates. So in conclusion, we know it provides value to communities, but post-pandemic, we don't really foresee this growth trend continuing all the way. Post-pandemic, you're going to see some decline in usage. And again, for policy purposes, if you want people to use telemedicine, then again, ICT, information and communications technology access, and also consumer education. We did a convenience sample survey of people in the McDonough County area, and then most of them, they don't know how to use the app. They don't know, so consumer education is also needed for them to learn how to use the app and then use telemedicine. And finally, incentives. We know that CMS injected $8 billion into telemedicine in 2020, and they relaxed many constraints in using telemedicine. And if it continues, it may actually keep the momentum, but still we expect the post-pandemic numbers to come down a bit. That's the research in a nutshell, and and I'm hoping that you will download the paper and the software, and then take a look at them and let us know your thoughts. Laura?
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you, Dr. Tiemann, for that great presentation, for the work that you've put in. I did want to let folks know that the interactive software that you referred to, I did put a link in the chat box so folks could go there. You'll see 3 or 4 different telemedicine publications that Dr. Tiemann has been working on. And at the end of the value of telemedicine summary, you'll see the link there for that interactive software. So that's where you'll be able to find them. And we did receive a question. Who would you say? I'm sorry, COVID has certainly played a role in utilization of telemedicine, but what is changing in policy that is supporting such a pivot in care?
Like what I said, in my concluding remark, CMS relaxed so many restrictions in terms of telemedicine use. They previously, I think Laura, first presentation mentioned that you need to have origin destination kind of constraints. They relaxed that, and they also put in $8 billion. And COVID-19, if you go through the publications, one of my publications, it deals with, who is really using telemedicine. Is it people who, are afraid of COVID-19? So I have a paper on that subject, and you will see that telemedicine use during the pandemic, is because of incentives. So it's not really, there are, when it comes to choice, risky choice, there are two triggers for you to actually, buy something risky. One is what's called as your personal liking. We call it personal attitude. There is another factor which is called impersonal attitude. That is to do with, incentives. So you will tend to like something, which is your personal kind of attitude. And the personal liking can be enhanced by adding incentives, impersonal attitude. So the uptake of telemedicine now is because mostly, I would say from our estimates, it's around 40% is because of incentives. It's not because of people liking. And again, coming back to, is it because of COVID-19? In our research, we found that both segments, people who are really afraid of COVID-19 and people who, don't really care that much, they used telemedicine. And again, for the second segment, which is people who don't really care about COVID-19, they used it because of incentives. And the incentives, we're hoping will continue, but we need to wait and see. But I can tell you, in New York Times, there is an article that says that people have started going back to their regular face-to-face consultations.
Thank you. Just want to remind folks, if you have any questions, comments, please include those in the chat box so that we can respond to those. Here's another question. Who would you suggest would be the best, like what's the best person that would go through your interactive software and look at that data? If just a common, like a citizen that's interested, or would be a local government leader, or is there like an ideal? We might not have all the folks here that could benefit from it, but if these folks wanted to share it with others, who do you think would be?
Okay. Yeah, see, when we programmed this, two audiences, we had two audiences in mind: community economic developers. So they need to know what's happening at the county level. And again, we believe that county level calculations like this, economic value of telemedicine is lacking. So it's for county economic developers, for example, to, county level decision makers to gain insights into what's happening in terms of telemedicine and how it's impacting their county. And then researchers, So again, that's why we came up with the paper, and then we put this interactive application so researchers, both basic and applied researchers, can start thinking in terms of how we did this and how valid is our conclusion and so on. So so it's for both of them, practitioners and also for researchers.
Thank you. So could the types of incentives which are being used or proposed, especially in rural areas, I think there's a word missing, just a second. Okay. Sorry, could you review the types of incentives that are being used or proposed, especially in rural areas?
As far as I know, telemedicine is very much now, at least what data we have, is from CMS. The data are from CMS. And we also have private insurance companies. Private insurance companies, they said they will actually continue providing incentives. That means you don't need to pay anything. Copay is zero for using telemedicine. But the question is whether it's going to continue forever. People who have insurance and who really like telemedicine, and they don't really mind copay, they will continue using it. But once it comes to people who rely really on incentives, then it's up to the commercial insurers. And they have actually said they will waive copay up to February, I think, 2021. And as a date, I'm not sure how individual health departments are helping with telemedicine coverage. I think Chris may have more, Chris Merritt may have more idea, but CMS is going to continue, and we don't know. So incentives, they're going to expire, and I don't know how it's going to continue in the future.
Thank you. And if you have any other questions, please include those in the chat space. So Dr. Atayman, it looks like if folks go to the website which the link was provided, you have the 4 different publications. So are you expecting to do more, or those are the 4 main ones that you plan on doing at this time?
We have a couple of more papers coming up.
Okay.
One is to do with, again, even this research is to do with individual traits and behavior and so on. We don't have anything in terms of county-specific indicators impacting on telemedicine use. So that's the next paper that's coming up, and it'll be up there within a week. It's called Ecological Impacts on Telemedicine. And this is going to continue, and we want to really assess not just the economic impact, but also we want to probe in depth into what's called this quality adjusted life year. So it is to do with not just cost savings and the benefits for the counties, but we are going to actually think in terms of how telemedicine is benefiting individuals in terms of their quality of life and so on. So that's another paper that we are working on. So, we have a bunch of research coming through.
Thank you. And I misspoke. There's 4 publications, 3 of them are on telemedicine, but if you go to the Institute's site, the ones we're talking about are listed in 2021, but they've got a lot of other great information on other topics that might be of interest if you want to spend some time going through their past publications.
This is Chris. I was just going to mention, Kathy Brown asked a question about mapping telemedicine use to underserved areas in the state. And I think that's one of the areas, Adi had mentioned at the very beginning how there's a lag time in getting access to the data, and there's also a cost to the data. And and that's sort of the mathematical gymnastics that Adi went through to basically build models to make estimates about what the monetary value was of telemedicine. But the question that Kathy Brown is asking about mapping during COVID, how underserved areas are being served is one of the very questions I think that we would like to ask. But again, there's a 3 to 6 month lag time, and at least, and then there's a monetary cost. So it's a great suggestion that Kathy has made, and it's one of the questions that we are also very much interested in.
And that's one of the things that we have addressed in the ecological paper that's coming out in a week. We have really clustered counties into different groups based on factors, ranging from population density to segments of underprivileged people and so on. And we have related that to telemedicine use. So that's the paper that's coming out.
Thank you. At this point, Mike, would you like to put our poll question up so folks can answer that? Don't forget, if you have more questions, please feel free to put those in the chat space. We'd also like attendees to respond to the poll that's up on your screen. All right, Chris or Dee, any final comments you have before we start wrapping up?
I guess I had one, just sort of a larger point about, whether it's telemedicine or thinking about the application of this technology to education. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions that remain. And so I think what this research is trying to do is to really start sort of a more sophisticated discussion about the economic value of these technologies. I mean, clearly there's a public health, community health value. In some ways, telehealth is risky in the sense that you don't have the same interaction with your healthcare physician. But presumably some of those data points will be over time resolved, being able to take temperature remotely, so on and so forth. But it's still risky in that sense that there's missing information, and yet there are definite economic pluses. And so the question would be, how do our brick and mortar healthcare providers in rural areas, how do they embrace and how do they deploy telemedicine? And in a similar fashion, higher education, K-12, how are we using these same technologies to benefit our communities, both from a public health perspective, but also as an economic development? So I think that's part of even the 30,000 foot is that we know that the healthcare system is all about our own individual and community physical health, but we also want to draw attention to the economic health that the telemedicine and distance education can bring to rural places.
To add on to,
Comment.
sorry,
Go
Laura.
ahead.
To add on to what Chris said, our research is very much based on, data that are mixed in a sense that we have individual level information, and also we have macro or meso level information, like the state and county level information. But the problem is for us to really gain some insights is, again, data. And for 2020, we have to wait up till the end of this year to gain access to the whole bunch of data. And that too, we have to go through what's called as ethical reviews and so on. We need to make the application, pay the money, and then wait for 3 to 6 months before we gain access to data. It's going to be like looking at the rear view mirror and driving blindly. So it's not like we have information that we can really use, current information that we can use to make decisions. And by the way, what we have done is in one of our papers, which is coming up, is we have mined social media to understand telemedicine positives and negatives, benefits and issues with telemedicine. And one of them is to do with telemedicine's impact on brick and mortar, face-to-face, traditional healthcare. And we have some indications that physicians, some of them, they don't really want to engage with telemedicine because of they have the technology issues and so on. But again, I don't want to actually project anything negative, but what I am saying is the social media mining, the data, they do show some sort of zero to negative association in terms of traditional healthcare, the brick and mortar kind of establishments and telemedicine usage, so it is impacting a bit. But again, more research is needed. And American Physicians Association, they have done a survey, and which is hosted online on their website. And in there, it's less than 40% of PCPs, they want to actually engage in telemedicine, which is also indicative of what we are seeing in the social media mining. But again, the outcome in terms of individual level health outcomes, the efficacy of telemedicine is also under question. It's good for behavioral therapy, and also for wound care, but other areas they're not so sure. So again, further research is needed. But our analysis is very much to do with Illinois, and the social media mining is restricted to Illinois. And there we do see some sort of zero or a bit of negative association between brick and mortar establishments, and there's a surge in telemedicine uptake. So there is a negative kind of, so they are the brick and mortar, they do feel like it's impacting them.
There were a few comments. It says, until the public knows and feels the economic savings, they may not value telemedicine. Would also need to have the local primary care providers express a value to their patients. That might be tricky. And besides not being skilled in telemedicine, primary care providers may see this as a loss of revenue. So yeah, I think that it's difficult when folks, depending on how they see telemedicine, if they if they're still seeing their primary care provider, it shouldn't be a loss of revenue. It should be the same. But if they're seeing someone outside of who they would normally see, then it might be viewed differently.
Yeah, the teledoc and so on, they are the issue. You don't get to see your own PCP, and then you get to see somebody, some physician, but so that's where the problem is. If it is to do with the PCP offering telemedicine services, I think that'll be more successful than the teledoc kind of model that's coming in now.
Right. Well, Chris and Adi, we really appreciate your time, and Adi, all the work that you've put into all of the telemedicine research you've been doing and that you continue to do. I'm excited about looking through the software or the database that you put together and check that out. Just so folks know, this was actually the third in a three-part series of telehealth and telemedicine. So if you have an interest and you weren't able to join us before, this recording and the first two presentation recordings are or will be available on the local government education website with extension. Again, Nancy will send an email out probably in the next few days with a link to that recording so that you can see those or share them with others. As far as Real Partners, we have our next webinar series in March is going to be focused on agriculture and farm families. So you can look for that information to come out. If you aren't familiar with Real Partners, we are Illinois Rural Development Council. We are a membership organization with a volunteer board. And again, we're offering this webinar series throughout the year with a different area of interest each month. So I did include in the chat box a link to Real Partners website. I also wanted to mention, and Chris might want to expand upon this, but the Western Illinois University Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs is hosting their annual Rural Community Economic Development Conference next week. It is virtual, and there will be a presentation there on telehealth, as well as some other important topics related to rural community economic development. And there's also a link to their website where you can sign up for the virtual conference. Chris, anything to add about the conference?
You covered it just nicely. So thank you very much, Laura.
Yep. We appreciate all of you being here with us today. We appreciate our presenters' time, and know that the Extension Local Government Education is continuing to offer webinars on a regular basis, and we look forward to continuing partnering with that office as well to offer some in conjunction with Real Partners. So thank you all for being here today, and have a great day.